The Nordic operator counts liters per hour, the way a banker counts basis points, and somewhere in the late 1990s, he started counting his way out of Caterpillar. Volvo Construction Equipment, the Swedish manufacturer based in the city of Eskilstuna, was the machine he counted toward. A wheel loader burning 38 liters per hour against a comparable Caterpillar, drinking closer to 44 or 46, does not announce itself with a press release. It shows up on a fuel invoice at the end of a Swedish winter, and it keeps showing up month after month until the spreadsheet makes the decision for you. There is an operator in Sweden who says he has 25 years in Northern Europe and cannot remember the last Caterpillar he physically saw on a job site. That is not an insult, that is an audit. What happened in Scandinavia is one of the quietest corporate retreats in the history of heavy machinery, and almost nobody in Peoria or Chicago, or eventually Irving, Texas, said it out loud. Caterpillar did not lose the Nordic market in a price war or a scandal. It conceded it slowly, through a series of boardroom decisions that treated Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland as a premium niche not worth the dealer investment. The Volvo-BM combination came together in 1985, hardened into a full Volvo construction equipment by 1995, and the home team simply built better cabs, answered the phone faster, and burned less diesel. The American giant, meanwhile, was busy becoming a financial machine that happened to make excavators. If this is your first time here, subscribe. We document the corporate decisions inside the boardrooms that hollowed out one of the most respected industrial brands of the 20th century. Region by region, the data tells the story, and the Nordic chapter is one of the cleanest case studies you will find anywhere in the industry. To understand the retreat, you have to remember that there was a time when Caterpillar was the standard, even here. Through the 1970s and into the 1980s, the yellow machine was the default specification on large Scandinavian infrastructure. Hydroelectric projects in the Norwegian fjords, the road network expansions across central Sweden, the harbor works in Denmark, you would find Caterpillar dozers and Caterpillar excavators doing the heavy work. The brand carried the prestige of American industrial dominance, the same prestige that put Caterpillar engines in ships and generators across the planet. For a Nordic contractor, buying yellow was the safe institutional choice, the equivalent of buying the blue chip stock. Nobody got fired for specifying a Caterpillar. Then the operators started doing the math, and the math was not about prestige. It was about their backs. Here is the decision that nobody in the United States seems to want to claim authorship of. Somewhere in the strategic planning of the 1990s and the 2000s, Caterpillar's leadership looked at the Nordic region and saw a small, expensive, demanding market sitting right next door to the home factory of its most serious global rival. Sweden alone is a country of roughly 10 million people. The entire Nordic construction market is a rounding error next to North America or China. To a Harvard-trained executive building a financialized growth story for Wall Street, the calculus was simple. Why pour dealer capital, parts depots, and field service engineers into a cold, demanding, premium market where a Swedish home team brand already owned the loyalty in the dealer? Relationships. The shareholder primacy answer was, you do not. You harvest what you have, and you redeploy the capital where the volume is. This is the pattern that repeats across every region we document. The MBA logic optimizes the quarter and surrenders the decade. Caterpillar moved its headquarters from Peoria to the Chicago area in 2017, and then to Irving, Texas in 2018, chasing the posture of a global financial enterprise rather than a manufacturer rooted in a place. The dealer network, the parts availability, the field service, these are slow, expensive, unglamorous investments that do not show up in a quarterly earnings call as a line worth celebrating. So they were starved. And in a market like Scandinavia, where the buyer is a sophisticated professional who measures everything, starving the service network is not a small mistake. It is a surrender. The operators noticed first, because the operators always notice first. And what they noticed more than anything else was the cab. This is the spine of the whole story, so sit with it. A heavy machinery operator in Northern Europe is not in his machine for an hour. He is in it for 10 hours, in the dark, in the cold, across a career that might run 20 or 30 years. The single most important component of that machine, the one that decides whether he can still stand up straight at 55, is the operator cab. The seat, the vibration damping, the visibility, the noise, the climate control, the placement of the controls, so his spine is not twisting the same way 10,000 times a day. Volvo understood this earlier, and more completely than anyone, and it built its entire reputation on it. The Swedish manufacturer treated the operator's body as the central design problem, not an afterthought bolted on at the end. Think about what a working spine is actually worth, because the operator does. Whole body vibration is the quiet career ender in this trade. Every hour the machine shakes. That energy travels up through the floor and through the seat base and into the lumbar discs, the same 5 or 6 vertebrae carrying the load every day for decades. Volvo engineered against that physics directly. The air suspension seat that floats the operator instead of bolting him to the chassis. The damping that absorbs the shock loads of a loaded bucket dropping into a truck bed before they reach the lower back. The low-frequency vibration isolation that a younger operator does not even notice, and a 50-year-old operator feels in every joint. None of that is glamorous. None of it shows up in a horsepower figure or a breakout torque number. It shows up 30 years later in whether a man retires walking uprightly or retires on a disability pension with a spine the doctors describe as that of someone 15 years older. The visibility belongs in the same conversation because it is also a health and safety question, not a luxury. A Volvo cab built around large glass, slim pillars, and a clear sight line to the bucket edge and to the ground crew means the operator is not craning his neck and rotating his trunk 1,000 times a shift just to see the work. Every twist he does not have to make is a twist his cervical spine does not pay for later. The climate control matters for the same reason. A cab that holds an even, warm temperature through a Nordic February keeps the lower back muscles loose instead of cold and clenched, and a loose muscle protects the disc behind it. Volvo treated all of this as one integrated system. The noise level, the control geometry, the seat travel, the heating, all of it tuned around the simple fact that the most expensive component on the entire job site is the human being, sitting in the machine. The recurring grievance, repeated by operators across the Nordic countries and across the years, is that the older Caterpillar cabs were simply harder on the body over a long shift, more vibration coming through the seat and into the lower back. A cab layout that did not respect the geometry of a human being doing repetitive work for 10 hours. Operators talk about climbing out of an older yellow machine at the end of a winter shift with their lower back locked up, and then climbing into a Volvo and feeling the difference within a week. This is not brand loyalty. This is a man protecting the one asset he cannot replace, which is his own spine. The smart operator switched to the Swedish cab the moment his back told him to, and his back told him long before any spreadsheet did. Put a real cost on it. A wrecked spine does not just end a career early, it bleeds money the whole way down. The physiotherapy. The lost shifts in a season that is already short. The younger operator who has to be trained to replace the experienced one who can no longer climb. The steps without pain. The equipment that keeps a 40-year-old operator working comfortably at 58 is worth more than any spec sheet can capture. Volvo sold that math even when it never printed it. The cab was never a comfort feature. It was an asset protections feature, and the asset was the man. Frame it the way the operators frame it. The man who moved to Volvo was not betraying America. He was refusing to donate his lumbar discs to a company that had already decided his market was not worth a parts depot. Then comes the fuel, and the fuel is relentless. The Nordic operator counts diesel the way other people count breathing. A European wheel loader, a Volvo L180H or an L220, earned a reputation for moving more material per liter than the comparable yellow machine. Call it the difference between 38 liters per hour and 45 on a hard day of loading. Over a single machine, over a single year of 2,000 hours, that gap is thousands of liters of diesel, and diesel in Scandinavia is not cheap and never has been. Multiply it across a fleet of 15 machines, and the fuel difference alone pays for the cab upgrade, the better resale value, and the operator who is still healthy enough to keep working. The spreadsheet that the executives in America were using to justify abandoning the market was the same spreadsheet the Nordic contractor was using to justify abandoning Caterpillar. Different conclusions from the same arithmetic. Now run the arithmetic across a whole season the way a Nordic fleet manager actually runs it. The Scandinavian building season is brutally short, with the heavy earth moving compressed into the month the ground is workable, so the machines run hard and long when they run at all. Take that 7-liter-per-hour gap and stretch it across a fleet that is all working at once during the same narrow window. 7 liters an hour, across 15 loaders, across the peak hours of a short season, is tens of thousands of liters of diesel that the Volvo fleet simply does not burn. That is not a rounding error to a contractor. That is a line item large enough to change a bid on a contract. Large enough to underprice the competitor still running yellow. Large enough that the most fuel-disciplined firm wins the tender and the least. Disciplined one slowly stops winning work. The fuel gap does not just cost money. Over a season it quietly reorders who is still in business. And then there is the phone. When a machine goes down on a Scandinavian job site in February, the contractor is not measuring his loss in pride. He is measuring it in idle crews and missed deadlines, and the only question that matters is how fast the part arrives and whether anyone picks up the phone. This is where Volvo and Liebherr quietly destroyed the American competitor. The Volvo dealer support culture in the Nordic region became a genuine competitive weapon. Calls answered, parts in stock locally or shipped overnight, a field engineer who knew the machine and knew the site. Liebherr, the family-owned manufacturer with deep roots in European engineering, brought the same discipline to its crane and excavator support, the kind of methodical reliability that a German and Swiss family business builds over generations rather than chasing it for a quarter. The logistics behind that phone call are the part the boardroom never understood. A dealer network is not a marketing expense. It is a physical lattice of parts depots, vans, trained technicians, and warehouse stock, positioned close enough to the work that a broken machine becomes a working machine again before the day is lost. Volvo built that lattice across the Nordic region as a matter of survival because it was the home team, and it could not afford to fail its own neighbors. The common wear parts sat on local shelves. The technician knew the road to the site because he had driven it before. The diagnostic call was answered by someone who had stood in that exact cab. Liebherr ran the same playbook with the patience of a family business that measures its reputation in decades, not in the next earnings release. When a crane or a large excavator went down, the response was engineered, stocked, and staffed in advance, so the answer to the contractor was a delivery time, not an apology. Against that, the Caterpillar experience in a starved market was a part that had to come from a central depot far away. A dealer network thinned out because the region was deemed not worth the investment, a wait measured in days instead of hours. For a contractor running thin margins through a short Nordic building season, days of downtime is the difference between profit and loss on a contract. The operators learned this the hard way once, and then they specified Volvo or Liebherr the next time and never looked back. JCB, the British builder, picked up its own share of this abandoned ground, especially in the lighter equipment and the backhoe loaders, bringing a European understanding of the market that the American giant had stopped pretending to have. And underneath the big names, the Nordic region did something Americans rarely appreciate. It grew its own specialists. Hudig, the Swedish builder, made a name with backhoe loaders as in railroad machines engineered specifically for the conditions and the work the region actually demanded. Lannon, from Finland, built bultverps and amphibious machines for the lakes and the wetlands and the soft ground that a generic global product was never designed to handle. These are not giant companies. They are proof of something more damaging to Caterpillar than any single competitor. The Nordic market is sophisticated enough and demanding enough to engineer around the absence of the American brand entirely. When the home market builds its own niche machines, the imported giant is not a competitor anymore. It is a memory. Look closer at what those two specialists actually represent, because it is the whole argument in miniature. Hudig did not try to out-Caterpillar. It built a railroad machine that can drive a regular road and then climb onto the rails to maintain the rail network, a backhoe purpose-built for the exact infrastructure work a Nordic country needs done in its own conditions. That is the opposite of a global product flown in from a continent away and expected to fit. Lannon went somewhere a generic excavator simply cannot follow at all, building amphibious and multi-purpose machines that work the soft ground, the shorelines, the wetlands, and the lakes that cover so much of Finland. A machine that floats and digs where a standard tracked excavator would sink is not a luxury there, it is the only tool that can do the job. By walking away, the American giant left the door open for the home market to build exactly the machines the home market needed. Every Huddig on the rails and every Lannon on the water is a small monument to a market that decided it no longer needed to wait for Peoria. So where does that leave things in 2026? Walk onto a major construction site in Stockholm, or Oslo, or Copenhagen, or Helsinki today, and do the survey the operators do for fun. The yellow is gone, or close to it. The excavators are Volvo and Lever, the wheel loaders are Volvo. The cranes are Liebherr, the backhoes and the rail machines might be Huddig. The amphibious work is Lannon. Picture the whole site at once. The articulated haulers running material are Volvo. The compact equipment threading between the foundations is European. The service van that pulls in when something breaks carries a familiar local name on the door, and the technician who steps out has been to this site before. There is no yellow in the photograph at all, and nobody on the crew finds that strange, because for most of them, there never was. There is a second operator, this one with a quarter-century in the trade, who puts it even more bluntly than the first. In the Nordic countries, he says, he has never seen a Caterpillar. Not rarely. Never. For a brand that was the global standard of the 20th century, that is not a slump in market share. That is an extinction event in a single region, and it happened quietly enough that the boardroom could pretend it was a strategic choice rather than a defeat. The detail that makes this a clean case study, rather than just a regional preference, is that the American company was not beaten on the thing it was supposed to be best at. Caterpillar built its global legend on durability and raw capability, and nobody is seriously arguing the iron could not move dirt. It was beaten on the things its leadership decided were not worth investing in, the operator's back, the fuel invoice. The phone call at 7 in the morning when a machine is down. Those are not engineering failures. They are choices about where to put money, and a company run by financial managers optimizing for the next quarter put the money everywhere except the places a Nordic professional actually cares about. There is a version of this story where Caterpillar fights for Scandinavia, pours capital into the dealer network, redesigns the cab around the operator's spine, and matches Volvo leader for leader. It is not a fantasy. The company had the engineering depth to do all of it. What it did not have by the 1990s and increasingly after was a leadership culture that valued a demanding premium market more than it valued a clean quarterly story for Wall Street. Volvo, Lever, and JCB did not out-invent Caterpillar so much as they out-cared in the specific places that a professional operator measures. The family-owned and homegrown European builders treated the operator as the customer. The financialized American giant treated the shareholder as the customer and the operator as a cost to be optimized away. If you have operated in the Nordic countries in the last decade, drop the brand and the model in the comments and tell me the last time you saw a Caterpillar on a Scandinavian job site. Let us see how many of us watched this happen in real time, on real job sites, before any boardroom in Texas admitted it. Here is the claim, and I want you to argue with it. The Nordic market did not reject Caterpillar because the machines were bad. It rejected Caterpillar because the company stopped showing up, and a sophisticated professional market will always abandon a brand that treats it as a rounding error, no matter how strong the logo once was. The fuel bills and the cab comfort and the dealer response told the story years before any executive in Texas would have admitted it on an earnings call. The operators and engineers who switched to Volvo and Lever a decade ago were not following a trend. They were reading the same data the boardroom was reading, and they had the honesty to act on it first. The operators who saw it coming already know. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.